Have you ever noticed how easily people crumble today? One harsh comment on social media and they're devastated. A minor setback at work and they're ready to give up. A relationship ends and they act like the world is ending. But what if I told you there's an ancient philosophy that can make you mentally unbreakable? What if you could develop the kind of inner strength that makes you immune to life's inevitable storms? That's exactly what we're diving into today. If this resonates with you and you want more content on building unshakable mental strength, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next in this journey toward becoming mentally invincible. The ancient Stoics weren't just philosophers sitting in ivory towers. They were warriors, emperors, and slaves who faced real adversity and emerged stronger. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while plague ravaged his lands. Epictetus was born a slave and became one of history's greatest teachers. Seneca navigated the treacherous politics of ancient Rome. These weren't men living easy lives, they were forged in the fires of genuine hardship, yet they developed principles that made them mentally unbreakable. Compare that to today's world, where people need safe spaces, trigger warnings, and constant validation just to function. The contrast is striking, and it reveals a fundamental truth. We've become mentally weak not because life is harder, but because we've abandoned the practices that build real strength. The first principle of mental unbreakability is understanding what you can and cannot control. This isn't just philosophical theory, it's practical wisdom that will revolutionize how you approach every challenge. The Stoics divided everything into three categories: things you control completely, things you don't control at all, and things you influence but don't control. You control your thoughts, your responses, your actions, and your values. That's it. Everything else, the weather, other people's opinions, the economy, your past, even your future, is either completely outside your control or only partially influenced by you. Modern weakness stems from trying to control the uncontrollable and neglecting what you actually can control. Picture this. You're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The weak mind immediately spirals into anxiety, anger, and frustration. You honk your horn, curse at other drivers, and arrive stressed and scattered. The Stoic mind recognizes that the traffic is beyond control. Instead of wasting energy on frustration, you use the time to mentally prepare for your meeting, practice breathing exercises, or simply accept the situation with calm. You arrive late but composed, ready to handle whatever comes next. That's the difference between mental weakness and strength. One person lets circumstances control their emotional state. The other maintains their center regardless of external conditions. Here's where modern society has it completely backwards. We're taught that feelings are facts and that we should follow our emotions wherever they lead. The Stoics understood that emotions are simply information, not commands. They practiced what they called the discipline of assent, which means examining your initial emotional reactions before accepting them as truth. When someone insults you, your first emotion might be anger. The weak mind immediately acts on that: anger, lashing out, or seeking revenge. The strong mind pauses and asks, is this anger justified? Does acting on it serve my long-term goals? What would the person I want to become do in this situation? This pause between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine your boss criticizes your work unfairly in front of your colleagues. Your initial reaction might be embarrassment, anger, or the desire to defend yourself aggressively. The Stoic approach would be to pause and recognize that your boss's words are external events beyond your control. Your response, however, is entirely within your power. You could choose to respond with dignity, ask clarifying questions, or simply acknowledge the feedback and move on. By not reacting emotionally, you maintain your composure and often earn more respect than if you had fought back. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The second pillar of unbreakable mental strength is developing what the Stoics called preferred indifference. These are things that are naturally preferable: wealth over poverty, health over sickness, praise over criticism, but they're not essential for your happiness or virtue. Modern weakness comes from treating preferred indifference as necessities. People think they need certain outcomes to be happy: the perfect job, the ideal relationship, social media validation, or financial security. When these things are threatened or lost, they crumble because they've built their identity on unstable foundations. The mentally strong person prefers good outcomes, but doesn't depend on them for inner peace. They work hard for success, but aren't devastated by failure. They enjoy praise, but don't need it for self-worth. They value relationships, but don't become desperate or controlling when conflicts arise. This mindset doesn't make you passive or indifferent. It actually makes you more effective, because you can pursue goals without the desperation that clouds judgment and sabotages performance. Consider the entrepreneur who launches a business. The weak mindset is attached to the outcome. The business must succeed, or I'm a failure. This attachment creates anxiety, leads to poor decisions made from fear, and results in devastation if the business fails. The Stoic entrepreneur gives their absolute best effort, but remains mentally prepared for any outcome. If the business succeeds, great. If it fails, they extract lessons, maintain their confidence, and start planning their next venture. They're unbreakable because their identity isn't tied to any single outcome. The third principle is what I call voluntary discomfort. The Stoics regularly practiced exercises that prepared them for hardship. Seneca would spend days eating only bread and water, sleeping on hard floors, and wearing rough clothing. This wasn't masochism, it was training. Just like athletes stress their muscles to make them stronger, the Stoics stressed their comfort zones to build mental resilience. Modern society does the exact opposite. We seek maximum comfort and minimum discomfort. We have apps to avoid waiting, services to avoid inconvenience, and endless distractions to avoid boredom or difficult thoughts. This comfort addiction creates mental weakness, because when real hardship inevitably comes, you have no resilience to handle it. The person who's never been uncomfortable crumbles at the first sign of difficulty. The person who's regularly practiced discomfort sees challenges as familiar territory. They've already proven to themselves that they can handle more than they initially thought possible. Start small, but start today. Take cold showers, skip meals occasionally, walk instead of driving when possible, have difficult conversations you've been avoiding, or spend time in silence without digital distractions. Each small discomfort you voluntarily embrace builds your capacity to handle larger challenges when they're not voluntary. You're literally rewiring your brain to see discomfort as manageable rather than threatening. The fourth pillar is memento mori, which means remember death. This might sound morbid, but it's actually liberating. The Stoics regularly contemplated their mortality not to become depressed, but to gain perspective on what truly matters. When you remember that your time is limited, petty concerns lose their power over you. The argument with your neighbor, the social media drama, the minor career setback, they all shrink to their proper size when viewed against the backdrop of mortality. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal, which we now call Meditations, that each day could be your last. This wasn't pessimism, it was clarity. When you truly internalize that your days are numbered, you stop wasting emotional energy on trivial matters. You become more decisive because you understand that waiting for perfect conditions is a luxury you don't have. You become more forgiving because holding grudges is a waste of precious time. You become more present because you realize that this moment is all you actually possess. This perspective also makes you mentally unbreakable because it puts every challenge in context. Losing a job is unfortunate, but it's not death. A relationship ending is painful, but you'll survive it. Financial setbacks are stressful, but they're temporary. When you regularly contemplate the ultimate challenge, mortality, you develop the perspective that makes all other challenges manageable. The fifth principle is negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum. This involves imagining loss before it happens, not to invite misfortune, but to prepare mentally for life's inevitable difficulties. The Stoics would regularly imagine losing their wealth, health, relationships, or status. This wasn't pessimism, it was insurance against being mentally devastated when losses occurred. Modern positive thinking culture tells you to only visualize success and good outcomes. This creates mental weakness because it leaves you unprepared for adversity. When challenges arise, you're shocked and overwhelmed because you've trained your mind to expect only positive outcomes. The Stoic approach is more realistic and ultimately more positive because it builds genuine resilience. Practice this by regularly imagining challenges you might face: job loss, illness, relationship problems, or financial difficulties. Don't dwell on these thoughts obsessively, but spend enough time with them to mentally rehearse how you would respond. What resources would you draw upon? What actions would you take? How would you maintain your values under pressure? This mental preparation is like a fire drill for your psyche. It ensures you won't panic when real emergencies arise. The sixth pillar is understanding the dichotomy of control in relationships. One of the greatest sources of modern mental weakness is trying to control other people's behavior, thoughts, or feelings. You cannot control whether someone likes you, agrees with you, or treats you fairly. You can only control how you treat them and how you respond to their treatment of you. This realization is initially uncomfortable because it strips away the illusion of control, but it's ultimately liberating because it frees you from the exhausting task of trying to manage other people's responses. When someone is rude to you, you have a choice. You can spend energy trying to change their behavior through argument, manipulation, or retaliation, or you can simply control your response. The first approach makes you weak because it depends on external cooperation. The my second makes you strong because it relies only on your own character. The Stoic doesn't ignore poor treatment, but they respond from a position of strength rather than reactivity. For example, if a colleague spreads rumors about you at work, the weak response is to engage in office politics, trying to control the narrative and change people's opinions. The strong response is to maintain your integrity, continue producing excellent work, and let your character speak for itself. You can't control the rumors or how people initially receive them, but you can control whether you give them substance through your reactions. The seventh principle is the discipline of action. The Stoics believed that virtue must be expressed through action, not just contemplation. Mental strength isn't built through thinking alone, it's built through consistently choosing difficult but right actions when easier alternatives are available. Every time you do what you know is right, despite inconvenience, fear, or social pressure, you build mental muscle. This means having difficult conversations instead of avoiding them, admitting mistakes instead of making excuses, keeping commitments, even when motivation fades, and standing up for your values, even when it's costly. Each right action strengthens your character and builds confidence in your ability to handle future challenges. You become unbreakable because you've proven to yourself repeatedly that you can choose virtue over comfort. The eighth pillar is philosophical acceptance, which doesn't mean passive resignation, but active engagement with reality as it is rather than as you wish it were. The Stoics had a phrase, amor fati, which means love of fate. This doesn't mean enjoying every experience, but accepting that every experience, including the painful ones, is part of your path and contains opportunities for growth. When you fight against reality, you waste energy that could be used for constructive action. When you accept what is, you can focus entirely on responding effectively. This acceptance paradoxically gives you more power, not less, because you're working with the full truth of your situation rather than the limited truth of how you wish things were. The ninth principle is developing your internal scorecard. The Stoics cared more about their own assessment of their character than external recognition or criticism. They developed clear personal standards based on virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline, and measured themselves against these standards rather than social approval or material success. Modern weakness often comes from having an external scorecard that depends on other people's validation. Your self-worth fluctuates based on likes, comments, praise, or criticism from others. This makes you mentally fragile because you've given control of your emotional state to external forces. The person with a strong internal scorecard remains stable because their self-assessment is based on principles they control. The final principle is the view from above. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced imagining himself from a cosmic perspective, seeing his problems and concerns from the viewpoint of eternity. This wasn't about making himself feel insignificant, but about gaining proper perspective on temporary difficulties. When you zoom out far enough, most of your daily stresses reveal themselves as minor and temporary. This cosmic perspective doesn't make you indifferent to life. It makes you more engaged because you're not paralyzed by the illusion that every setback is catastrophic. You can take appropriate action without the emotional distortion that comes from treating temporary problems as permanent crises. You become unbreakable because you maintain perspective even in the midst of difficulty. These 10 principles aren't just philosophical concepts, they're practical tools for developing mental strength that no external circumstance can break. The Stoics proved their effectiveness through centuries of practice, and you can prove their effectiveness in your own life starting today. The question isn't whether these principles work. The question is whether you're willing to practice them consistently enough to transform your mental resilience. Remember, mental strength isn't about avoiding all discomfort or eliminating all emotional responses. It's about developing the capacity to remain centered, clear-thinking, and value-driven regardless of external circumstances. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever life presents without losing their essential character or inner peace. The world needs more mentally strong people, individuals who can face reality without denial, handle criticism without crumbling, pursue goals without desperation, and maintain their values under pressure. These principles can make you that person, but only if you commit to practicing them consistently. Mental strength, like physical strength, is built through regular exercise and progressive challenge. Start today with one principle that resonates most strongly with you. Practice it for a week, then add another. Over time, these practices will compound into genuine mental unbreakability. You'll find yourself remaining calm in situations that used to trigger anxiety, responding thoughtfully in moments that used to prompt reactivity, and maintaining your center when the world around you is chaos. That's the promise of Stoicism, not a life without difficulty, but a life where difficulty can't break you. Not a life without emotions, but a life where emotions inform rather than control your actions. Not a life without setbacks, but a life where setbacks become setups for stronger comebacks. This is what it means to be mentally unbreakable, and it's within your reach if you're willing to do the work.